We all remember 2020, the summer of love, the burning buildings, all the looted stores, and an overall lack of legal consequences for crimes committed by rioters. However, in a Blaze exclusive, Blaze investigative journalists Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman revealed that the Pentagon approved the use of directed energy weapons on rioters in June of that year. Here to discuss with me is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Steve Baker himself. Steve, your article makes some pretty bold claims. So what exactly did you and Joe uncover, and how did you guys verify it?
Well, before I answer that question specifically, let me just say that this is not really the culmination of 4 years of work. This is finally the reveal, the very beginning of us revealing 4 years worth of work. And it began with our investigations into what was going on the day, on January 6th. And then as a result of that, the contacts that we made, it began with contacts through the law enforcement agencies that were on the ground that day, but also because in that process, I was also at the same time investigating the reports that I had received that military were on the ground that day. United States military operatives were on the ground. Now, not necessarily for nefarious reasons. I don't know. I just know that I had special operatives who I've had a long-term relationship and who are connected, and they were telling me that they had boots on the ground there at the Capitol that day. So my curiosity began to just lead me down a number of rabbit holes, and I began to pull a lot of threads. And throughout that process, I began to discover that there were new types of systems that I was not aware of that possibly could be used to both control crowds as riot control, but also had other uses to move people in ways that maybe the American public are not aware of. We've heard about the Havana Syndrome. That's been around for years. Catherine Herridge, just a week or so ago, had a big reveal. She had a CIA whistleblower come forward. We had looked at congressional testimonies about the Havana Syndrome and the types of directed energy weapons that were used or possibly used to create those anomalous health incidences that they talk about. And I began to study on my own the difference between what they call the RF or microwave weapons and then the audio weapons itself. Now, that led me to go back to the intelligence community contacts that I have, back to the special forces military community that I have sources with. And through that, we began to learn a lot more about what's really available to our government right now when it comes to crowd control.
Steve, I think it's important because none of us really have a clear idea of what we're talking about when you say systems or directed energy weapons. So go a little bit into what kind of weaponry we're talking about, what kind of devices we're talking about.
Well, we have to go all the way back to the 1950s. The Soviets were very active in developing what they called psychotronic weapons at that time. Now, this is open source information. As a matter of fact, everything that I know about it, I've pulled directly from the CIA website. I mean, the CIA.gov website has thousands and thousands of articles and that have been declassified that go back to their own intelligence sourcing of what the Soviets were up to back then. Then we fast forward many years. If I'm skipping over a lot, which we will get to with the Blaze and through our series of articles on this subject. But if we jump to 1991, then we find out when the Soviet Union fell that many of their scientists were selling their information and selling their science to our government and other buyers as well. And through that, we were able to purchase, when I say we, elements of our government were able to purchase advanced technology in what they call the directed energy weapons space. And some of that was much more advanced technology than what we even talk about when we're talking about Havana Syndrome. We're talking about now not just truck-mounted riot control weapons where they have the big arrays mounted on top of a tank or a military armored vehicle of some sort. and that we have seen in crowd control, even in our story. We have a video that Julio Rosa, our own correspondent, took in Kenosha back in 2020 of an actual audio device, an audio energy weapon, blasting at what they call a super audio levels to clear crowds out. There are microwave versions of that they can blast at you and make you, for a 2-second pulse, it makes your skin feel like you're on fire and you run away from that. Those are the very basic things that we've seen around for a long time. Those are not science fiction. You can actually go to YouTube and watch DOD sponsored videos of the use of those types of weapons. But over the years, they've got much more sophisticated and much more miniaturized to the point where they can carry them in backpacks now. So they have backpack size, and what some of these special operatives have described to me in great detail, what they call agitation weapons. And this is the thing that we fear the most, is that these weapons that we know have been used overseas in military and by the CIA in operations to create color revolution, to create riots, to create confusion in hot spots around the world, that some of these devices may now be being used here. And that's what we found in it was an IG report from the Department of the Interior investigating what happened on June 1st there at Lafayette Square Park in the District of Columbia. That was during the George Floyd BLM riots at that time. And we actually found from that IG report actual photos and descriptions of the use of one of these backpack-sized weapons. Now, the one that was used there, the IG report actually says that it does not know what other capabilities that particular weapon had, but we know through our sources that they contain both what they call super audio and sub audio. Now, on sub audio settings, it can actually agitate, drive people crazy. They're the only ones, they actually hear it in their ears or in their head themselves. Some people call it the voice of God weapon. There's all kinds of names for it, but there's so many different arrays of this technology. And I think that the most fearful of them all now are some of the RF or microwave type transmissions. These are 74 gigahertz beams that they can aim at somebody. They can talk to you inside your head, make you think that you're hearing voices. They can also attenuate those frequencies to such a way that it resonates with different parts of your body. Different organs resonate to different frequencies. Just like your truck antenna resonates to AM and FM radio signals, our body, whether it's the lungs, our heart, our brain, different folds in our brain can resonate at different frequencies. And as a result of that, can create different reactions from the victim or the intended target. And the most well, I'll just say that the thing that I'm most curious about is if it is being used, and if this technology is being used in other riots around America, were they being used on January 6th?
Well, Steve, that's a good point, because you did touch on the use of these weapons potentially on foreign soil. But when it comes to U.S. soil and the federal government doing this against American citizens, how is this legal? How concerned should average citizens be that if they do show up to just an event, a large gathering, what should we be looking into here?
As we reported from the IG report, is that the Metropolitan Police, the District of Columbia, DC Metro Police, they actually loaned one of these backpack audio weapons to the United States Park Police for that particular event. And since then, we have been told through sources just in the last few days that United States Capitol Police have also purchased a couple of these LRAD events or backpack weapons as well. And that doesn't tie us back to Milley. Our sourcing on Milley comes from a very high-ranking current active duty officer who was in a meeting with the former chief of staff of the military for the Trump administration, in which he was not necessarily bragging, but in conversation he told about 20 officers that he himself had made available for that riot these types of weapons. And in his commentary, he actually said that he made available both heat and sound weapons. So that the heat would be the microwave, RF frequency weapons, and the sound, of course, would be the ones that we saw the photos of that the Park Police were using.
Steve, last question. Give us some hints at what you'll be looking at next in this series.
In this series, I think the next place we go is we're going to tell the history, because look, this story brings out the wackadoodles. I mean, my DMs are full of people with all kinds of wild, crazy stories about this. There are, in the same way that the drone stories bring out the crazies, the same way that the UFO stories bring out. We're not going that way. We are only going with the science. We're only going with the hard facts. A lot of this is open source, but we've been very fortunate through the Blaze to be able to build some very, very trusted sources who have actually participated in the actual development of these particular, what they call agitation weapons, that have been used on the battlefield, that are being tested by our military, that are being tested on our military. And as we've learned from other congressional hearings, some of these weapons are being not only used overseas, but they are being used here in the United States. Now, who's using them? Are these foreign nationals? Are these agitators from China, Russia, or Iran, or whoever or wherever else? We know that those actors are working against us, but we also know that we have the same capabilities, if not better, and that we've been using them against their their best and their brightest, against their targets as well. And what we're most concerned about, and where we're following this right now, is if in fact the United States military or our intelligence services are using them actively on United States citizens here on U.S. soil.
Well, Steve Baker, it is an incredibly concerning story, and we are thankful that you and Joe have been looking into this. So we'll look forward to part 2 when that comes out. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Matt.
And Matthew, this is one of the things that, Blaze Media, Blaze News, the investigative journalism that nobody else is talking about the story.
Yeah, this is a story that a lot of people are afraid of, frankly, because as Steve says, it does bring out the crazies. It sounds wild, right? But as Steve was trying to walk us through, this is something that open source information can tell you this technology exists. And the question is, a very important question is, what are the limits of how it can be used domestically? And that's something that, just like with drones, we have to start talking about.